Find out what it means to me. How is Aretha doing?
Aretha's doing alright.
Just alright.
Singing is sacred, and you shouldn't do it just because somebody wants you to. What's most important is that you are treated with dignity and respect.
You're special, Ree. You have a talent they call genius.
You better think about what you're trying to do to me.
How old is she?
She's 10, but her voice is going on 30, honey.
Think that you might go let yourself be free.
How many albums have you had?
4.
And no hits.
I need you to focus and avoid frivolous distractions.
Honey, find the songs that move you. Until you do that, you ain't going nowhere.
I need a change. I want to sing what I want to sing.
Okay.
Find out what it means to me.
You really like it?
We love it.
Riri.
It's really good.
R-E-S-P-E-C-T. Find out what it means to me.
I got a single by this new chick named Aretha Franklin. To present Aretha Franklin Day.
You're not about to mess this up for me.
Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Aretha Franklin.
Looking out
This song goes
on
out
the morning.
to anyone who's ever felt mistreated.
I used to feel sure
You need to take a break.
I know how to run my business.
Have you lost your mind?
Maybe I found it.
I believe I have the chills.
Do you see what she is? She's a miracle.
Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for tuning in to this very special live panel and Q&A brought to you by the Female Lead and Universal. My name is Edwina Dunn. I'm the founder of the Female Lead, and I am honoured to be joined today by Liesl Tommy, Director of Respect, a biopic of the incredible Aretha Franklin, starring Oscar winner Jennifer Hudson, along with Mary J. Blige, Forrest Whitaker, and Audra McDonald. If you're watching, make sure to get involved with the conversation using the hashtag #RespectMovie. So we're now going to hear from the amazing Liesl Tommy, who became the first woman of colour to be nominated for the Tony Award for Best Direction of a Play. Respect is her film directional debut and follows the rise of Aretha Franklin's career, from a child singing in her father's church choir to her international stardom. We're going to start our panel with a few questions. So Vanessa, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Edwina. My first question is, what was the most thrilling aspect of directing this film and diving into the life of the amazing Aretha Franklin for you?
Hi there, it's so wonderful to be here with you folks, the Female Lead. I would say that, I mean, there were so many things about making this film that, you know, was just absolutely a joy, definitely a highlight of, you know, my creative life. Aretha Franklin was one of my heroes. I don't remember a time when I didn't know her music and love her music. And to get to be able to spend time immersing myself in her music and figuring out how to use it for storytelling, just creatively was, you know, heaven. And then the other thing I would say, because I come from the theater, live performance on set was going to be really, you know, essential for the aesthetic I wanted for this film. And so getting to listen to Jennifer sing every single one of those songs live, getting, you know, Audra McDonald sang her songs live, Titus Burgess sang live, everybody sang and played live on set. And as a music lover, that was just a dream come true.
I mean, the atmosphere must have been incredible, must have been speechless after each take. So it must have been such an honor. So what was it like working with the incredible female leads, Jennifer Hudson, Mary J. Blige, and also Audra McDonald?
Mary J. Blige is one of my absolute favorite pop stars from, when I was a teenager. And it was just, there were days when I couldn't believe that, she'd said yes. we were getting to, to work together. And Audra is somebody I've known for a long time because of, obviously we come from the same place theater-wise. And Jennifer, Aretha Franklin chose Jennifer to play her many years ago. Aretha understood, I think, that in addition to Jennifer's incredible voice, there was an enormous amount of soul and humanity that Jennifer brings. They shared similar heartbreaks and losses in their life. And I think Aretha Franklin really understood what would be demanded of an actress playing her, and that Jennifer had it. So everybody who came in, we all shared a love, a passion for Aretha Franklin, obviously. And so there was just no nonsense on set. Everybody was really focused. Our priority was taking care of Aretha Franklin's legacy.
And you all did it so amazingly. I mean, the film is incredible, and just for everyone else to see it, I think it's going to be definitely a massive moment in film. My final question is, well, in 1987, Aretha Franklin became the first woman inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and you became the first woman of color to be nominated for the Tony Award for Best Direction of a Play. So being a role model for so many girls of color, what did it mean for you personally to be able to tell this story?
Well, when the studio approached me about this, it was really meant to be a general meeting because they were going to hire a writer first. But I had such a very clear vision of what I thought this film should be. And I knew that because it was my first film, I hadn't made a film before, that it was kind of a long shot. So I kind of just barreled into that meeting. I told them what I wanted to do for the film. I told them that it should begin and end in the church. I told them the journey that I thought she should go on, the music, the style, because I really wanted it to be a, kind of a fashion design film, because she loved those things. I wanted it to really be a feast for the eyes, the heart, the ears. And then they said yes. They said that they were going to bring me on first, and we were going to build the film according to that vision. And it was one of those things where, to do this life, and especially as an immigrant, my family lives in South Africa, there's enormous sacrifices. And it was one of those moments where it just felt like it was all worth it, that it was all leading up to this moment.
Well, thank you for being the director and obviously telling the story on such an elegant and powerful way.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you, Vanessa. And I loved that phrase, feast for the eyes. I think that's exactly how I saw it. It was beautiful. Let me now please ask you some questions, Liesl. How did you become a director? What was your route in, and what led you to this particular film?
Well, I was an actor for a long time, since I was a teenager, really. And when I, got to grad school, the teacher said, we think you should also direct. And so while I was there, I directed as well as acted. And then when I got to New York, I understood what they were getting at, because, I really care about politics. I care about, what the story is doing, what it's saying. And I felt as an actor, I did not have enough agency. And so that's when I, slowly shifted into directing, and I reached out to playwrights whose work I admired, who I thought had something interesting to say. And we started developing new work together. And my kind of theater career grew out of developing new work. And then I started doing, classics, Shakespeare, musicals, because I do think as a woman, and particularly a Black woman, you'll get pigeonholed very quickly. And I just wanted to show that there was anything I wanted to do, I could do. And so I really made sure to vary the storytelling. And then I moved into television after, my show on Broadway, because I kind of felt like, well, that's a bucket list, ticked off. So let me move into the film and television realm, which I always wanted to do. And I did the same thing in television. I made sure that I did, I did Insecure for HBO. I did The Walking Dead. I did, a Marvel television show. So I really explored all the things I was interested in because, you just want to make sure that nobody says you can't do that, because you can then say, look, but I already did it. And so when it came to this film, I felt very prepared. I would emotionally feel sometimes overwhelmed because, she's one of my favorite artists and she's so beloved, and it just felt very cheeky to do this film as your first film. But technically, I felt very ready, very prepared.
Well, you certainly started at the top. I mean, what a film, what a great story. So help me to understand, what was the process like? How did you go about researching the film and helping Jennifer Hudson to really prepare for the role?
I did a lot of research when I was preparing my lookbook, because I made like a 60-page lookbook to kind of create the visual style, that I was interested in. And I spent a lot of time listening to her music. And then I brought Tracy Scott Wilson in, who is a dear friend and a writer that I've worked with in theater for years. And I spent a lot of time, as I said, listening to her music, doing deep dives in every interview that she, there ever was, from the 60s to now. And what I felt I wanted for the film was the way that we felt listening to her music to be the way that we feel watching the film. So what that meant to me was her music has great intimacy. Sometimes it feels like she's singing to you alone in a room, and it also has great size. It can feel very epic, very triumphant. And it also always is extremely emotional. She always is pouring her heart into her songs. And so I felt that was going to be the tone I was going to use for the film. I really let her music tell me what the film should be. And so that meant the movie should be very emotional, and that I should be able to have great moments of intimacy where we really explore, a woman's vulnerability, her fragility, her just, a raw emotional life, as well as enormous triumph, kind of epic concert sequences, like with Respect at Madison Square Garden. So that everything that we feel when we listen to her music, I wanted people to feel when they watched the film. So that was how I kind of mapped out the tone of the film. And then in terms of Jennifer, she really put her trust in me. I have a team of people that I work with in theater, dialect people, vocal coaches, acting people. And about 6 months before we started shooting, she just dove in with me and the crew, and we would rehearse in New York, work on movement, work on where Aretha's vocal placement lived in Jennifer's vocal placement. Because, I also didn't want it to be an imitation film, because there's a lot of real people in the movie, and I didn't want everybody feeling like they had to make, do these imitations of a person. I wanted everybody to find organically in themselves where that character sat. So we wouldn't have to worry about, oh, in that moment, she's imitating it right, she's imitating it wrong. We could just give over to the experience.
Well, I think my next question, from what you just said, is going to be very hard for you, but I was going to ask your favorite scene. So you've talked about the intimacy and then the epic. Is there one that sticks in your mind?
Yeah, my favorite scene is Ain't No Way, because that song is one of my favorite songs. It's one of Jennifer's favorite songs. It wasn't originally meant to be in the film, but then when we were in rehearsal, I found out she loved it as much as I did. So I said, okay, we got to figure out how to put this in here. But I love that song because, it has that intimacy. Her sister wrote it, and we see her, her generously allowing her sister to, to teach it to her and for them to work on it in the studio. But there's many levels of storytelling happening in that scene. We see her relationship with her first husband, Ted, start to kind of the flaws that get exposed. We see that, many dynamics in the room. And that's what I feel like storytelling with music can really give us. It can be so emotional, but it can also, just if you do it right, it can just reveal so much humanity. And I'm very proud of that sequence.
Fantastic. So there's a moment where Aretha has a conversation with her mother really early on, and her mother says, your daddy don't own your voice, nobody does, and you don't ever have to fear any man. You are so worthy. Don't you ever let anyone tell you otherwise. If there's one lesson you want women to take away from the film and from Aretha's life, what would it be?
I mean, that's it. That's why it's there so early, because, I just feel like women and girls can never hear that enough. And the film, when I pitched the film to the studio, I pitched it with the tagline, this is a film about a woman with the greatest voice in the world who is struggling to find her voice. And, that's why we spend time in childhood and we spend time in her early 20s. We know who she became. We know how powerful and confident she became, but she wasn't always that way. And I just think it's so fascinating and inspiring to see someone who was deeply shy as a child and quite insecure find her own power. And that is what the film attempts to illuminate.
It's a brilliant set of words that we can all learn from. But there are some quite dark themes in Aretha Franklin's life. There's sexual assault, there's domestic abuse, alcoholism. How important was it for you to really show all these aspects of her life and not just the music?
Well, again, I looked to the music for guidance, because my question was, why does Aretha Franklin sing the way she sings? And I'm not talking about the brilliant vocal, gift, God-given gift that she has, because there are many people all around the world who can sing beautifully, but she was able to bring an emotional intensity to her singing that was so particular to her. And so one of the things I felt was important in the film is to just really track, how did she become a person who could sing like that, and why did she sing that way? And I think that in order to, to experience the joy of her artistry, you also have to understand the heartbreak of her life, because she channeled all of that into her music. And to understand that, or acknowledge it, is essential when you look at her life, right? Because she was able to pour so much very specific emotional specificity into her stylings, her song stylings. And I think you have to have the dark with the light.
So women only make up about 20% of the key behind the scenes jobs in the really top grossing films and TV. As a female director, did you feel that you personally faced challenges when breaking into the industry?
Yes, definitely. As a woman director, and also as a Black woman, frankly, because I definitely, landed onto certain television sets where I was one of the first, and you get the sense that some people feel like you're a diversity hire. It's like what everybody's doing right now. So but you can acknowledge it, and then you just carry on and do the work, because the work will speak for itself. And that is really, those feelings are really not my problem. It's for them to manage. And it's, it's not a surprise. It's sort of a crashing bore, because, it's like hard to believe that people still think that way. Yeah. And, but for some people, it can be terribly undermining to the confidence. And one thing you have to have as a director is confidence. You have to have, the belief in your vision to drive everything forward. So that's the thing, is like, for me, it's nothing can shake my confidence, or else I won't be able to do my job.
Well, your work does speak for your talent, and that is rock solid. It's very much evident.
Thank you.
Let me just ask you, sisterhood is a really strong theme throughout the film, and I love the scene of Aretha playing the piano at 3 a.m. with her sisters, and she creates the fantastic hit Respect. It's not at the recording studio. There are no men in her life who have control over her voice at this stage. It's her style and the songs she sang, but it's with her sisters.
Yeah.
Is this a message about the power of women coming together?
I think it is. She had such meaningful women in her life, such powerful, meaningful women in her life. And I definitely think there's some things in this film that, very much lives inside the female gaze. The writer and the director being Black women, I think it's very clear that turning points when she was given advice, it wasn't the men in her life that gave her the advice that helped her change her trajectory. It was the women in her life. They were the ones who'd lived it, like Dinah Washington or her sisters, or Clara Ward, the great gospel singer. These women were in her life since she was a child, and they'd also lived extraordinary lives themselves. Of course, that's who would guide her and care for her. So I feel like that sense of sisterhood and that sense of mothers, aunties, sisters, cousins, girlfriends being the ones in our lives who are there for us when we're at our lowest point or when we're the most confused, felt very organic and very natural, for us. Something else in terms of thinking about the female gaze, we talked about some of the darker moments, her trauma. I do also feel like as a woman director, I wanted to have a light touch when it comes to violence or violence against women, because I feel like we've seen so many careless images of violence against women on screen, and I really wanted to take care of her, but also take care of our audience, because we know that there's a lot of women in our audience who are traumatized themselves. And so you're just thinking about us talking about like the female gaze and how it manifested. That's definitely something that I thought carefully about.
I love that phrase, the female gaze. It's really, really powerful, gentle but powerful. Can I ask you, who were your role models when you were growing up? Do you have a favorite director?
So growing up, my role models were all political activists because I grew up in South Africa during, the dark old days, and I came from a very political household. So people who were true leaders, people who genuinely cared about their fellow man and woman, people who were interested in creating a civil society. Those were the people that I paid attention to. And in a way, I think it really helped me when I became a director, because I understood leadership. And I took the role of being a leader very, very seriously. It's because the culture in my rehearsal room, the culture on my set, all of that stuff really matters to me, because it's, you're creating a mini society. It's a microcosm, so that's why making sure that there are women in key roles, that there are people of color in key roles, advocating for diversity on set is so, so important, because you're creating a culture of openness and welcomeness, so that stuff is, really matters. In terms of directors, when I was a girl, I loved Merchant Ivory films because I loved how they really transport you into another world. And I wanted that for this film, actually, that that it was a period film where you really wanted to like wear those clothes and sit on that mid-century chair and drink that cocktail. But I also was, galvanized by Spike Lee. When I was a young person, Do the Right Thing really changed my life. So that's that kind of energy plus the kind of visual perfection. Those were things that I'm always interested in.
Encapsulating that as a piece of advice, maybe for a young person who can look at you and just love everything that you've done, but wants to just get started in the industry. What would you say to them?
I don't think I have, when you say the industry, I don't think I have business advice, because I was more concerned with my artistic journey. So I focused on the things that I cared about storytelling wise. I cared about, stories about freedom, obviously coming from where I came from, stories about liberation, stories about people finding their authentic self. And also I cared about Black women. And so I did a lot of plays that took place in Africa or in the civil rights movement. I really honed my craft, in my work with writers, and always doing passion projects, always making sure that the work that I was doing mattered to me, and I felt was going to make an impact in the world. So that was really what I focused on, and that never changed when I was doing like downtown off Broadway things to, you know, to Broadway, to this film. It's all that you can track the sort of the aesthetic, the taste, and the content. It's very consistent. So, you know, that was really important. And you know, getting training so that you can feel confident. I think the most important thing a young artist can give themselves is the gift of confidence. And whatever that means for them, however they can obtain that, because this is an industry that is constantly trying to undermine your confidence, constantly trying to take away, you know, your kind of artistic self with rejection, and it has to be irrelevant.
So passion, resilience, all those things really, really matter. And I've heard that from so many great women. Thank you so much, Liesl. We now have some questions from our audience, which I'd love to put to you. If you had to describe the film in one word, what would it be?
Triumphant.
Perfect. Aretha was a feminist and an activist who inspired millions of people. How important was it to portray this side of her life in the film? Do we see a lot of her activism?
Yeah, the activism was very important to me. You know, it was a point of connection that I felt, you know, again, growing up in South Africa with an activist family, from a very early age, I heard people speaking about, you know, civil rights movement, the struggle, and as did Aretha. And she grew up to be somebody who, you know, who deeply cared about advocacy and activism. And I so admired that, and I felt like that was essential to put in the film. And also, she was a woman who was a product of her time. So she shifted from a civil rights activist person into a Black Power activist person. You know, she came into her women's power, she came into her Black power in the 60s, and that is just so exciting. It was an exciting time. It was important to show that.
So you've talked about, you know, your very clear passion and direction, but you know, what was the biggest challenge that you faced when you were directing the film, and how did you overcome that?
I would say the biggest challenge was whenever you're making a studio film versus an independent film, you have a massive machine and they're pouring an enormous amount of money into you know, every day of your life, you know, on set. And so there's a lot of anxiety that you're managing. So you can never just be a pure artist, you know, working on set. You always have to manage a level of corporate anxiety, I guess, is the only way to describe it. And so for me, finding that balance of how to take care of that as well as stay true to the vision and not let that anxiety infuse, you know, my day-to-day choices, I think is, you know, for a first-time filmmaker, that was a big challenge. But, you know, all I can say is you just got to stay true to the vision.
When you were researching the role, what was the most surprising thing that you found out about Aretha Franklin?
That she had, when she first came to New York and was a professional singer, she had about 9 flops. 9 albums that just no one bought. And I think when you think about Aretha Franklin and that voice, you just assume that from the very beginning, you know, she was a superstar, and that wasn't the case. And it was terribly heartbreaking for her, you know, to experience flop after flop. And that is, you know, I think fascinating, and it's why it's an important part of the film.
Jennifer Hudson is incredible in the role. What gave you goosebumps? Was there a moment when you were filming where she transported you?
Yes, I mean, honestly, anytime she sang, she transported not only myself, but the crew too. You know, I'd look to the side and you'd see, you know, guys who'd been grips for decades, kind of seen it all, pretty jaded, and you just see tears coming down their face. as they're holding their cord. And that never got old, just to see the impact of such artistry in a room full of people day in and day out, and it was profound. Though I think that one of our most exciting days was when we shot Respect at Madison Square Garden, because if you don't get respect right in a movie called Respect about Aretha Franklin, I think it's all over. Everything is over, including my career. So, it was really, really important that we get that right. And, what I did is I just let her sing it through one time, at the very beginning with the camera rolling. And because, it was enormous amount of preparation to get that stadium in Atlanta to look like period Madison Square Garden and get the lights for the concert to, exactly right. And also period, just a lot of technical angst went into that. And so when she just kind of let her rip the first time through, it was like a party, even the background, we had hundreds and hundreds of background actors and just everybody went crazy. And it was just like, we're going to be fine.
Stellar scene, stellar moment. Liesl, thank you. Thank you to everybody who sent in those awesome questions as well. We now have a very special video from the star of the show, actor, award-winning actress and Grammy-winning artist, Jennifer Hudson.
So how did you personally connect to the role of Aretha?
So many ways. Like, first of all, I'm a fan and I grew up listening to Aretha Franklin. I also grew up in a church like Aretha Franklin. So that musical background was already there. I was an aspiring singer, just like Miss Franklin. So it's like so many different parallels to me that I even learned more about when I was playing her.
What was it like working with a mostly POC cast?
I thought it was refreshing and new and done in a unique way, whereas like it's very rare we get to see films done by African Americans, then African American women telling a story about a female figures such as Aretha Franklin, and then the cast as well, living middle class, upper class ministers, public figures, just legendary and iconic. So I thought it was beautiful to see us being reflected in such a light.
Wow. What's one lesson that women can learn from the film and just Aretha's life in general?
Taking ownership and responsibility for yourself in that way, and just stepping up into the forefront and trusting that voice and owning it, because that is the arc of the film where you start off seeing men take the forefront on her behalf, but she didn't really get her strength until she owned it and until she stepped up to the plate, and there's power in that. So I think that's a great message to take away.
So who are your female role models?
Well, I have a lot of personal ones. I have a lot of strong women in my family. That is a huge investment in who I've become, from my mother to my grandmother, my aunts. They taught us to be strong women and be confident and be independent and have confidence, and to take up space in a room. And then artists like Aretha Franklin, Whitney Houston, and Patti LaBelle's and Barbara Streisand, you know what I mean? It's so, I just like to see people in their glory and celebrating themselves, and I find that inspiring.
So do you think a younger audience could definitely use Aretha as their own role model?
Oh my God, yes. I mean, because it's some really good life experiences and lessons in it that I think so many will be able to relate to. And she was timeless. So it's something where everybody can find something in it to be able to connect to. And I think it's also good with biopics for young. Those are my doggies. You hear that? That is MVP. I'm at home, girl. So to just be able to pull from and to see the triumphs and the things that she went through and she still prevailed. I think that's good for young people to be able to see and learn from. And then her music is just so dope. Okay. There is no musician that's been out there that has not been influenced by her.
Definitely. For me, the scene that struck me the most was when child Aretha turned around and she had a baby bump. That's been in my head since I've watched it.
Yes. I was speaking to a kid the other day who's 11, like last night, and he had the same reaction. Or guess what? My son is 12 years old. So when he saw that, he's like, she was my age. Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. And it's insane to see how much things have changed since then.
Exactly.
But obviously, we still have such a long way to go.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that must have been amazing for you to be a part of in showing the history, basically.
Yeah. To be that bridge, to be able to help introduce it to generations like yourself and those, Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Jennifer. So great to hear from you. We sadly have come to the end, but we very much hope you enjoyed the panel. A huge thank you to Liesl and to Vanessa for joining us today. We hope you enjoy the film. Respect is in cinemas in the UK. Keep an eye on our page for more updates over the next week. And please don't forget to let us know what you think. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you so much, Edwina. Thank you, Vanessa. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much. You are amazing.